What if I told you that the harder you try to conquer your exhaustion with discipline, the deeper you push your nervous system into total paralysis? You drink more coffee, you force yourself to push through the brain fog, yet you feel like a ghost in your own home. Take David, a 55-year-old executive in London. To his team, he is an untouchable leader. But at 8 p.m., sitting on his sofa, his chest feels like it is crushed by concrete. His gut twists with unexplained pain. His medical tests show nothing. He thinks he is weak or losing his mind. But David is not broken, and neither are you. Your body is not betraying you. It is executing a brilliant survival algorithm. Your vagus nerve has simply pulled the emergency brake. Today, you will discover why your relentless willpower is making you sicker, how the dorsal vagal freeze traps you in a state of invisible numbness, and the exact 10-minute somatic protocol to send a biological safety code directly to your amygdala without forcing a single positive thought. But first, let me ask you, when was the last time you felt truly safe inside your own skin? Meet David, a 55-year-old executive orchestrating global supply chains from his glass office in London. He is the man who fixes absolutely everything, the ultimate provider, the one who never drops the ball. But lately, there is a terrifying glitch in his perfect system. It does not start in his logical mind. It starts deep in his gut, a sharp twisting agony that strikes just before the critical board meetings. His jaw is locked so tight in his sleep that his teeth are fracturing under the immense pressure. He forces down another double espresso, pushing violently through the thick, suffocating brain fog that rolls in every afternoon at exactly 3 p.m. He tells himself it is just temporary stress. He just needs more rigorous discipline. He just needs to try harder. So, he pushes, he tightens his grip on reality. He uses his unyielding stoic willpower to forcefully override the deep exhaustion. Because that is exactly what you do, right? You do not complain, you simply perform, but the pain rapidly becomes impossible to ignore. The phantom chest tightness feels exactly like a fatal heart attack. The severe irritable bowel syndrome leaves him paralyzed in the restroom, dripping with cold sweat, while his colleagues laugh over a lavish dinner just a few feet away. The isolation is absolutely deafening. He is essentially a fading ghost at his own life's banquet. Desperate. David does what any logical person would do. He hunts for a scientific diagnosis. He books the most expensive specialists in the city. He goes through endless MRI scans, intrusive endoscopies, comprehensive blood panels, desperately looking for the tumor, the tangible physiological enemy he can physically fight and defeat. He waits anxiously for the verdict. And then, the doctor smiles politely and hands him a piece of paper. Everything is perfectly normal. Your organs are healthy. It is just severe anxiety. You just need to take a vacation and relax. Relax. The word hits him like a violent physical insult. How on earth can you relax when your nervous system is actively screaming that you are under immediate lethal threat? You know this exact feeling, do you not? The quiet, soul-crushing devastation of being told your invisible pain is entirely in your head. You leave the sterile clinic, sit alone in your car, grip the steering wheel, and just want to scream into the void. You feel completely invalidated. You start to gaslight yourself, thinking maybe you really are just terribly weak. Maybe you genuinely lack the resilience everyone else seems to have. But here is the brutal, liberating clinical truth that modern Western medicine often misses when hyper-focusing on a localized organ. Your stomach is not broken, your brain is not somehow defective. The expensive medical machines are simply scanning the biological hardware, when the fatal error is entirely embedded within the nervous system software. The pain you feel is 100% real. It is a desperate biological SOS. Your body is not a malfunctioning machine that is failing you. It is a fiercely loyal bodyguard that is intentionally trying to shut you down to save your life. But why is it shutting down aggressively? What invisible predator is it still trying to protect you from? To truly understand this paradox, we have to look completely away from your stomach and look directly at a wandering bundle of survival fibers called the vagus nerve. And far more importantly, we must look at what you have been silently running away from since you were a very small, unseen child. Why does the most brilliant part of your mind completely fail you when you need it the most? Think about it. You have likely tried everything to fix this invisible brokenness. You read Stoic philosophy, you try cognitive behavioral therapy, you force yourself to sit perfectly still and write in a gratitude journal, while your stomach ties itself into excruciating knots. You try to use sheer logic to command your biology to simply calm down. But it never works, does it? The paralyzing anxiety always returns. The heavy numbness always creeps back in. Here's the painful, liberating truth that breaks the illusion of mind over matter. Your vagus nerve does not speak English. It does not understand rational logic. It does not care about your impressive career, your bank account, or your unyielding willpower. When David tries to mentally force himself out of his dorsal vagal freeze, he is attempting to use his prefrontal cortex, the newest, most evolved part of the human brain, to negotiate with a primitive survival system. But the neurobiology is brutally clear. Your amygdala processes threats in a fraction of a millisecond, long before your conscious mind even registers what is actually happening. By the time David tells himself to just snap out of it, his biology has already pulled the plug. According to polyvagal theory, when your nervous system determines that fighting or fleeing is entirely impossible, it initiates a profoundly ancient defense mechanism. It forcefully drops you into a dorsal vagal shutdown. It is an evolutionary masterpiece designed for a time when early humans needed to play dead to survive a lethal predator. Your body drastically drops its heart rate. It numbs your physical sensations. It intentionally severs your conscious awareness from your flesh to spare you from overwhelming agony. This is exactly why David feels like a fading ghost at his own dinner table. His body is literally simulating death to protect him. It is not a moral failing. It is not a lack of personal discipline. It is a highly efficient biological algorithm working flawlessly. But here's the catastrophic evolutionary mismatch. There is no physical predator in David's living room. There is no wild animal stalking him in the office. So, what is his nervous system so desperately trying to protect him from? Why is his vagus nerve constantly signaling a catastrophic threat in a perfectly safe, comfortable environment? The answer is heartbreaking, because the threat is not in the room. The threat is an invisible ghost from the past. And as long as you keep trying to fix this biological shutdown with psychological logic, you will remain trapped in this exhausting, painful loop. You cannot think your way out of a primal survival state. You have to physically feel your way out. But how do you communicate safety to a nervous system that has been tightly locked in survival mode for decades? How do you bypass the overthinking mind and speak directly to the traumatized flesh? The secret lies in a very specific, ancient physical language, a somatic code your body has been desperately waiting to hear since you were a child. Think about a time when you were 7 or 8 years old. Imagine that small, incredibly vulnerable version of yourself. When you cried out in the middle of the night, did someone reliably come to soothe you? When you felt overwhelmed by the chaotic adult world, were your complex emotions held, validated, and safely contained? Or were you the unseen child? Did you learn very early on that your sadness was considered an annoying inconvenience? Were you implicitly taught that you only held value when you were quiet, exceptionally well-behaved, and completely self-sufficient? If you grew up in a landscape of emotional neglect, your developing brain made a devastating yet perfectly logical calculation. It realized that displaying vulnerability actively jeopardized your attachment to your caregivers. It learned that fighting back or fleeing the house was physically impossible. So, your biology chose the absolute last resort for survival, the dorsal vagal freeze. It intentionally severed the connection between your emotions and your conscious awareness. You learned to become entirely invisible to yourself just to survive the environment. Fast forward 30 or 40 years, David is now a highly successful, powerful adult, but his nervous system is still running that exact same outdated childhood software. Every time he faces intense pressure at work, or every time someone demands too much of his heavily depleted energy. His amygdala instantly recognizes the old familiar pattern of emotional unsafety. It remembers the profound helplessness of being that unseen child. And so it aggressively pulls the emergency brake. The excruciating stomach cramps and the suffocating brain fog are not random physiological failures. They are the somatized echoes of a terrified child who was never allowed to properly vocalize their distress. Your body is holding the heavy, unexpressed grief that your mind was forced to repress decades ago. You see, the modern hustle culture aggressively glorifies a rigid, stoic resilience. It commands you to simply grit your teeth and dominate your biological limitations. But applying toxic willpower to a frozen nervous system is like violently whipping a horse that has already collapsed from total exhaustion. It is not just cruel, it is biologically counterproductive. Your body is not asking you to forcefully push harder. It is desperately begging you to finally stop. It is asking you to stop abandoning that invisible child. The profound numbness you experience at a lively dinner party is not a character flaw. It is a profound act of evolutionary love from a body that is actively shielding you from an emotional overload it believes you cannot survive. To heal this deeply rooted disconnection, you must completely stop treating your physical symptoms as enemies to be eradicated by sheer force. You have to understand that your relentless drive for perfection is simply a sophisticated trauma response. You have been running a frantic marathon to escape a shadow that is permanently attached to your own physiology. You are completely innocent. The structural wiring of your nervous system was built for a war zone that no longer exists, but no one ever told your body that the war was finally over. So how exactly did David finally break free from this invisible prison? He had to completely abandon his lifelong strategy of fighting his own biology. He had to learn the profound difference between toxic willpower and true stoic discipline. Toxic willpower aggressively forces a frozen system to sprint. True stoic discipline is having the absolute courage to sit quietly with the profound discomfort and selectively focus only on what you can immediately control. David realized he could not simply command his mind to stop panicking, but he could fundamentally control his physical posture, his breathing, and his somatic environment. He began applying a radical 10-minute bottom-up rescue protocol based on the polyvagal theory and the ancient concept of Wu Wei. The Taoist art of effortless action. First, he practiced radical physical permission when the heavy brain fog rolled in at 3 p.m., instead of forcefully gulping down another espresso. David locked his office door, lay completely flat on the hard floor, and allowed his body to just surrender. He stopped fighting the freeze. He sent a powerful message to his nervous system saying, "I hear you, and it is entirely safe to power down for a moment." This is somatic resourcing. By intentionally giving the body permission to collapse, you instantly remove the catastrophic biological threat of being forced to perform. Second, he had to physically stimulate the ventral vagal pathway to bring his system back online. Remember, the amygdala only speaks the primal language of physical sensation. So David used the physiological sigh, 2 quick, sharp inhales through the nose, completely expanding the lungs, followed by 1 long, slow, audible exhale through the mouth. He repeated this deliberately for 3 minutes. Scientifically, this specific breathing pattern directly signals the vagus nerve to aggressively lower the heart rate and discharge built-up carbon dioxide, physically forcing the biological emergency brake to release. Finally, he introduced a subtle sensory shift. He kept a glass of ice-cold water on his desk, not to drink, but to hold against his wrists or the back of his neck. The sudden, intense drop in temperature forces the nervous system to immediately orient to the present physical moment, instantly dragging his awareness out of the invisible childhood trauma and anchoring it firmly back into the safe, adult reality of his London office. This is not a magical cure, it is a precise biological hacking. By combining the stoic discipline of physical regulation with the gentle Taoist acceptance of his emotional exhaustion, David stopped being at war with his own flesh. He stopped treating his body like a broken machine that needed to be punished. Instead, He became a compassionate architect of his own biological safety. Within weeks, the agonizing stomach cramps began to fade. The crushing chest tightness dissolved. He was no longer a ghost haunting his own life. He was finally back in his body, fully alive, deeply grounded, and inherently safe. And if a 55-year-old executive who spent decades burying his inner child can physically rewire his shattered nervous system, you absolutely have the power to courageously do the exact same thing right now. You have spent your entire life trying to be the perfect provider, haven't you? You genuinely believe that silencing your own internal needs was the ultimate act of mature love. But true existential sovereignty, the kind of stoic power that fundamentally transforms your reality, begins the exact moment you stop going to war with your own biology. Your physical body is not a heavy burden to be forcefully conquered by intellect. It is the only true home your nervous system will ever know. When you finally stop punishing yourself for feeling entirely numb and start listening to the desperate physical echoes of your vagus nerve, you actively reclaim your stolen existence. You absolutely do not need anyone else's permission to pause. You only need your own. The 10 quiet minutes you spend on the floor, breathing somatic life back into your frozen system, is the most profound act of personal rebellion against a modern world that heavily profits from your chronic exhaustion. If David's journey shifted something deep inside your chest today, if you finally recognize the invisible weight you have been carrying, I want you to comment the word surrender below. Make the hard choice to stop the brutal war with your own flesh right now. But as you finally step into this newfound biological safety, there is one final deeply unsettling truth that we must face together. What if the terrifying anxiety you feel in the dark, the deeply rooted primal panic that inexplicably locks your jaw at night, does not actually belong to you at all? What if you're desperately fighting a biological ghost that was quietly passed down to you long before you were even born? The clinical science of epigenetics is currently proving something both horrifying and beautiful. We literally inherit our ancestors' unresolved trauma directly within our DNA. So, whose terrified fear are you actually carrying right now? The true origin of your panic is not what you think it is. And in the next video, we will carefully sequence that exact genetic mystery and finally teach you how to break the invisible chain.